We are back now on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to get into this topic on the Dallas Cowboys. Not a lot of injuries, significant injuries that the Cowboys are dealing with going into their next couple of games. You know, they just managed to get over a bad New York Giants team. The score was closer than it really should have been. 20-15, it was exactly last Thursday when the Cowboys went over to MetLife. They beat the Giants, and with how CeeDee Lamb performed, with how that offense was, moving the ball pretty well, and how people viewed this game as sort of a get-right game for the Cowboys after they lost to the Saints and how they lost to the Ravens. This was a great opportunity for them in a lot of people's minds that they could go out there, smack the Giants around, and it could get some more confidence boosted into them. But, it was only a 5-point game. Now they're 2-2, which is great, but now it's kind of crazy to think that we're entering into the hardest part of their schedule, where this game should have been that confidence booster, right? I felt like a lot of people walked away thinking nothing new about this Cowboys team, or maybe even feeling worse that they only beat the Giants by 5 points. And now the worst news coming from that game, not only was it the fact that it was a close game, but also they lost DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons to some pretty significant injuries, right? Starting with DeMarcus Lawrence, he's expected to be out 4 to 8 weeks because of a Liz Frank injury in his foot. Not a complete fracture or anything like that, but it's just a injury that he suffered in that game against the Giants to the Liz Frank joint in his foot. It doesn't require surgery or anything like that, but he will be placed on the IR, and he'll have to miss the next 4 games before he is eligible to come back off of that. So that's a huge loss, obviously, to the weaker side of their team. And just like DeMarcus Lawrence, Micah Parsons also was hurt in this game. It looked like he got his ankle rolled up on against the Giants, and he was sort of carted off. And it said that he is dealing with a high ankle sprain. And I think he was seen with a walking boot at some point this week and sort of riding around on a scooter as well. So, high ankle sprains, any sort of ankle injury are always kind of weird. And you don't really know how, it sounds kind of weird, just how fully fit they might be. They might be eligible to come back, but it always is one of those injuries, like a hamstring injury or something like that, that just makes me nervous. Because it always feels like within a season, with the wear and tear on the ankles, the tackling and everything like that, and obviously the high intense running with a hamstring injury, it always feels like it could just pop up at any given moment. So that's what makes me the most nervous about the Micah Parsons injury, even if he might come back earlier than DeMarcus Lawrence. I just feel a little bit unsure of how he'll look when he returns. And then you also have the Brandon Cooks injury. Not really an injury, but just he has been ruled out because he was ruled out yesterday as he recovers from a second procedure that he had on his knee. The first procedure, follow me here, was last week against the New York Giants. After the game, he stayed in New York to have a procedure to kind of address an issue in his knee that he was dealing with during training camp. But when he returned to Dallas a few days later, there wasn't something really sitting right. He had a second procedure, and there was actually an infection in there from the first one. So after he went in there, got it all cleared out, he has been ruled out because of that second procedure. So it's not like a muscle injury or anything like that. I expect him to be out at most. Obviously, this week he's already been ruled out, but at most next week, and then he should be back good to go. But those are 3 significant pieces to this team. And now I mentioned their schedule and how they're going to have to face this grueling schedule without 3 of their best players, right? You look at the games they have coming up. We have this week, week 5, at Pittsburgh. Then you come home the following week, week 6, against the Detroit Lions. Then you have a bye week, which is very good for them considering the injuries. Then you come back and you travel to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. Then after that, you travel to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. Then you're at home for the next 2 weeks, week 10 against the Eagles, and then week 11 at home again against the Houston Texans. And before that, you wrap it all up with a week 12 game at Washington. And without a doubt, these next games that I just mentioned there are without a doubt their toughest period within their schedule. And I don't know for sure in any of these matchups where Dallas can sort of just walk in there and we can confidently say that, oh, they should be favored in this game, or they should be able to exploit this part of whatever team they're playing that week and think that they're going to be able to just win that game. None of these games are screaming or even just saying, just in general, how maybe the Cowboys can win this game. Now, with that being said, I don't think there's any game that they should win, but there are closer matchups like this week against Pittsburgh. Maybe they could squeeze it out if the Steelers defense doesn't get it together, or maybe against the Lions, they lost to the Bucks. Maybe there's a chance there. The 49ers, they're 2-2. They lost to a very injured-riddled Rams team, and they also lost to the Vikings. They're not unbeatable, is what I'm trying to say. The Falcons, a little bit shaky. I just talked about their offense not being very efficient. That's a close matchup if you can convince yourself of that. The Eagles, it looks like they're eating themselves up from the inside out with the problems that they have internally, but they're still very talented. You could look at that matchup as a closer game. And the last one is Washington also. Are you a true believer? By the time they play the Commanders in Week 12, we're going to have a better idea of what this team is, but so far so good for them. They're 3-1 and they're leading that division. Those are the closer games that I mentioned, right? I know I threw Detroit in there, but I don't give them any sort of chance against Detroit. San Francisco, same thing. I mentioned them, but it's in San Fran. Probably some of the injured guys are going to come back. I don't know about Christian McCaffrey, but they're still very good, and the Cowboys have had a very tough time stopping the run, obviously. So none of these games are screaming that the Cowboys should win them. If any of these games, I don't know where they would get a win, honestly. At best, I could see a 6-5 record out of these matchups, right? And that's best case scenario if they beat the Steelers, if they beat the Falcons, if they beat the Eagles, and if they beat the Commanders. I'm not even gonna predict or project that they could beat any of these other teams. I'm giving them 4 wins, 4 to 5 wins there, and those are maybes at best. So I could see at best a 6-5 record coming out of these games over the next 11 games or so, and that's best case scenario, like I said, and it could potentially be worse because of the fact that there's going to be definitely no DeMarcus Lawrence for a good amount of these. Micah Parsons, again, touchy injury, very delicate as well, so I don't know when he is actually going to be feeling 100% to come back. And Brandon Cooks isn't going to be in Pittsburgh or potentially even against the Lions. So, these injuries are coming at the worst possible time for the Lions. And what's interesting about all these teams as well, if you really look at them, all of these teams can sort of match and line up face-to-face against the Dallas Cowboys' best positions that they have available, in my opinion, right? You look at the best positions right now for the Cowboys are quarterback with Dak, CeeDee Lamb, obviously, Jake Ferguson, and when they're healthy, Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence. Those are their best positions right now on that entire team. And you look at all these teams, and they can match up very well with all of those positions, right? The Steelers would be the closest one. Justin, you'd obviously take Dak over Justin. George Pickens and CeeDee Lamb, closer. Some people might take CeeDee Lamb. Tight end, Pat Freiermuth or Jake Ferguson, pretty much the same thing. And edge rushers, TJ and Micah, among those lines, right? But then everywhere else, you might still be in favor of those other teams' skill positions, like I said. Amon-Ra St. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott. In San Francisco, same thing. Debo, Brandon, George Kittle, just CeeDee Lamb on the Dallas Cowboys side of things. Elsewhere, on the Falcons, Kirk and Dak Prescott, Drake London, you'd probably take CeeDee Lamb over him, but tight end, you'd probably take Kyle Pitts. Edge rushers, probably the Cowboys, still very close. The Eagles have talent all over the place, same thing with them. Houston, same situation, and the Commanders, the way they've looked right now, probably a lot closer than you think. So with all the advantages the Cowboys might have with those positions, all these teams are very well equipped to also match them in those spots. And not only that, all of these teams love to run the ball they run the ball very well, or they're at least very committed to doing it throughout the entire course of the game, which hasn't spelled out a great result for the Dallas Cowboys over the last few weeks. So, to kind of look at the question now, are they able to overcome these injuries to sort of keep them afloat throughout the rest of this schedule and be in a position where we're still talking about them like a playoff team? I would have to say probably not. I just don't know where I would see any sort of silver lining for them for me to think that like like 6-5 is as best as I could give them. That would be their record at that point in time by week 11 or week 12. So, that's still an okay record, but it's basically what they have right now. And you know, that could be best case scenario, but you could be looking at also like I don't know, like probably like 8 loss team by then if you give them some 3 losses as well. And then from that point on, with the way the NFC is going, it doesn't look great at this point in time. So the worst part about this team, and I'll say it again to kind of wrap it up here, I don't give them that much of a chance because the main reason is that they're usually when you're like 2-2 or something like that, like take the 49ers or something, right? They're 2-2, or the Rams, they're 1-3. They're waiting for guys to come back. So it kind of gives you a little bit of hope, right? Or the Browns with Nick Chubb. But this team, the worst part about it is that we've already seen them at their best. No one is coming back to save them or significantly increase their performance, right? Right now, when Micah and DeMarcus Lawrence come back, that's going to be a big help. But we've already seen this version for the first 3 to 4 weeks. So that version is average at best. They're 2-2, right? The record speaks for themselves. So with them now gone, it could get even worse if that is even possible, right? So the worst part about them is that we kind of already know what kind of team they are, whereas other contending teams are getting better. Some are getting worse and are going to begin to fall off. But with the Cowboys, it's the same story. We've seen this movie before, and they're not going to get any better than what we've already seen. That's the scariest and worst part about this, and why I am very doubtful that they could have a winning record after these next couple of games. It's not looking great. It's going to start with Pittsburgh, and if they could win this one, it's going to be a huge help, because after that, like I said, the Lions, the 49ers on the road in Atlanta, the Eagles in there, the Texans as well. It's not looking great for the next couple of weeks. So if they could get this game in Pittsburgh, it's going to be huge. But even then, I don't think they would even win that game. So we'll reevaluate them after this upcoming week. But it's definitely looking pretty dreadful for the Cowboys now heading into these next couple of weeks. And speaking of dreadful, doubtful situations, we have to talk about the Jets. Coming up after the break, their star wide receiver, Garrett Wilson, had some things to say about how this offense is operating right now. He talked pretty openly on a radio show this week about this offense and their lack of creativity. So we're going to go into what he said and how worried should we be and whether or not he's right to be worried about this Jets offense. So that is coming up in just a few seconds. We'll be right back.